Morning everyone and welcome to Mindspeak, our first Mindspeak of 2015. I decided because there were so many things happening in the world today, I thought I'd try and touch on some of the items that interest me and hopefully are going to be of interest to all of you. And I was walking outside and I saw Giuliani, and Giuliani said to me, and this is a little bit of a diversion, he said, serendipity. And I remember writing on a tweet one day that I believed in serendipity, and he's never let me forget it. And serendipity is something like this, where you bring people together, where there's a group of people and things happen because of the collection. It's sort of luck, making your own luck, but making things happen. So thanks to all of you guys for being here. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the support tremendously. You know, I was thinking of what am I going to talk about, and this is a photograph in the back there of Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol, probably one of the most expensive artists these days, and he was a great commentator on contemporary affairs in a very artistic way. And he said, you know, the world fascinates me, and the world is so fascinating at the moment, so many things happening. If I may touch on one quotation, and I think this is what, you know, if somebody says, what do you actually do? What are you trying to do? Stanley Druckenmiller was George Soros's trading partner, and they were the ones who made £1 billion from the Bank of England when the pound fell out of the exchange rate mechanism. And he said about what he did, he says, as a macro investor, my job for 30 years was to anticipate changes in the economic trends, but I think we can anticipate them in the political trends as well, that were not expected by others and therefore not reflected in securities prices. And he was talking essentially about, you know, being a trader, looking for opportunities where the market is clearly mispriced and then exploiting them. And it resonates with me as a way of looking at life. The first thing that I think one can say in 2015 is that it's more adversarial than ever before. Adversarial, you have Putin on one side, you have a much more stressed out, I call it a rhythmic world, where there's plenty of things which could geopolitically pop over the radar. When I plugged Arrhythmic into my computer, it threw this up. For years, he'd been studying the phenomenon of chaos, of which an arrhythmic heartbeat was a perfect example. And I'll tell you why, and I want to play you a video. This video is a little bit Anglo-centric, but I think the point he's making applies to everything today.
So much of the news this year has been hopeless, depressing, and above all, confusing. To which the only response is, oh dear. But what this film is going to suggest is that that defeatist response has become a central part of a new system of political control. And to understand how this is happening, you have to look to Russia, and to a man called Vladimir Kurkov, who is a hero of our time. Kurkov is one of President Putin's advisors, and has helped him maintain his power for 15 years. But he has done it in a very new way.
Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
He came originally from the avant-garde art world, and those who have studied his career say that what Kurkov has done is import ideas from conceptual art into the very heart of politics. His aim is to undermine people's perception of the world, so they never know what is really happening. Kurkov turned Russian politics into a bewildering, constantly changing piece of theatre. He sponsored all kinds of groups, from neo-Nazi skinheads to liberal human rights groups. He even backed parties that were opposed to President Putin. But the key thing was that Kurkov then let it be known that this was what he was doing, which meant that no one was sure what was real or fake. As one journalist put it, it's a strategy of power that keeps any opposition constantly confused, a ceaseless shape-shifting that is unstoppable because it's indefinable. Which is exactly what Kurkov is alleged to have done in the Ukraine this year. In typical fashion, as the war began, Kurkov published a short story about something he called NonLinear War. A war where you never know what the enemy are really up to, or even who they are. The underlying aim, Kurkov says, is not to win the war, but to use the conflict to create a constant state of destabilized perception in order to manage and control. But maybe we have something similar emerging here in Britain. Everything we're told by journalists and politicians is confusing and contradictory. Of course, there is no Mr. Kurkov in charge, but it's an odd, non-linear world that plays into the hands of those in power. British troops have come home from Afghanistan, but nobody seems to know whether it was a victory or whether it was a defeat. Aging disc jockeys are prosecuted for crimes they committed decades ago, while practically no one in the City of London is prosecuted for the endless financial crimes that are being revealed there. In Syria, we are told that President Assad is the evil enemy, but then his enemies turn out to be even more evil than him, so we bomb them, and by doing that, we help keep Assad in power. But the real epicenter of this non-linear world is the economy. And the closest we have to our own shape-shifting, postmodern politician is George Osborne. He tells us proudly that the economy is growing, but at the same time, wages are going down. He says he is cutting the deficit, but then it's revealed that the deficit is going up. But the dark heart of this shape-shifting world is quantitative easing. The government is insisting on taking billions of pounds out of the economy through its austerity programme. Yet at the very same time, it is pumping billions of pounds into the economy through quantitative easing, the equivalent of £24,000 for every family in Britain. But it gets even more confusing, because the Bank of England have admitted that those billions of pounds have not gone where they are supposed to. A vast amount of the money has actually found its way into the hands of the wealthiest 5% in Britain. It has been described as the biggest transfer of wealth to the rich in recent documented history. It could be a huge scandal, comparable to the greedy oligarchs in Russia. A ruthless elite siphoning off billions of public money. But nobody seems to know. It sums up the strange mood of our time, where nothing really makes any coherent sense. We live with a constant vaudeville of contradictory stories that makes it impossible for any real opposition to emerge, because they can't counter it with a coherent narrative of their own. And it means that we as individuals become ever more powerless, unable to challenge anything, because we live in a state of confusion and uncertainty, to which the response is, oh dear. But that's what they
interesting way of looking at the world as we find it, and the philosophy of Kurkov, which is a constant state of destabilized perception. He describes his job, listen to this: my portfolio at the Kremlin and in government has included ideology, media, political parties, religion, modernization, innovation, foreign relations, and here he pauses and smiles, and modern art. He's written a short story, and I like this theory of non-linearity, which is this whole concept of non-linear war, or NATO call it ambiguous warfare, and I think it also is spilled into the markets. Writing about non-linear war, he says, in the primitive wars of the 19th and 20th centuries, it was common for two sides to fight, two countries, two groups of allies. Now 4 coalitions collided, not 2 against 2 or 3 against 1, no, all against all. And if you look at the world from the proxy wars we see in the Middle East, to shadow zones in Ukraine, to Ebola, you know, we see a very, very complex, multi-layered world, which is no longer, it's no longer simple to understand. It's got so many cross currents. And I think this is importing a lot of uncertainty into how people look at the world today and how people understand it. Andrew here is an expert in security, but what is clear to all of us is that the asymmetric threat is not a military guy, it's a few individuals with a computer and some kind of ability to make an impact in society, from what happened in Paris to Boko Haram to what happened to us here at Westgate. If you look across the world and you look at just at the numbers, in Nigeria, you're looking at an increase year on year in Boko Haram of about 300% in terms of number of people killed. I mean, it is going off the scale. And one interesting observation I'd like to make, and I'm going to get to the markets in a minute. You know, you looked at something like Charlie Hebdo, where 17 people died. You looked at something like Baga, where we don't know how many people died, but more than 17. And what was interesting for me was the way, first of all, even our African leaders all made way to Paris. No one bothered to go to Nigeria. But what was interesting was, as we watched the debate happen on social media, after about 24 hours, people started asking this question. Why is Omar Bongo sitting in Paris when he's got his own challenges in Gabon? Is he really Je suis Charlie, or is he not? And what I think that told me was something very interesting, which is loss of control over the media in terms of the Western world has really largely owned the media. And I think social media has actually been a tremendous positive influence for us to get our voice heard, for people who went to say, if 2,000 people died in Baga, how does that compare to 17 people in Paris? Are those lives worth more? And I think that was extremely interesting as an observation. And then, of course, we're getting these photographs coming on practically every week. And what it is also, if you think of the imagery, if you look at people like Al-Shabaab, you look at Boko Haram, for people who are meant to be in the jungle, these guys are extraordinarily good at understanding the digital media. They are using the digital media in a very powerful way to get their message across. And there's a very famous quote by Don DeLillo, which I just want to touch on. In societies reduced to blur and glut, he says, terror is the only meaningful act. There's too much everything, more things and messages and meanings than we can use in 10,000 lifetimes. Inertia, hysteria, is history possible? Is anyone serious? Who do we take serious? Only the lethal believer, the person who kills for faith. Everyone else is absorbed. The culture hasn't figured out how to assimilate the terrorist. And he's saying the terrorist kills the innocent because that's the only language that the world understands. You know, we understand it when we see a photograph of this guy who was, by the way, a disc jockey in London and a rap singer, apparently. And there's a whole interesting area amongst this sort of new modern terrorists where they seem not to have come out of Africa. They're coming out of the Western world and coming back here. Let me move on now, after those observations, to a geopolitical level. What we have seen in the last 18 months is really the most sophisticated oil and currency warfare. And the oil and currency warfare specialist is that man. And I don't know how this guy, who was a community organizer, understood the financial markets in such a sophisticated manner that he managed to do what he has done. And I'm going to explain what he's done. And I listened to him very carefully. And I think it must be so annoying to be president of a country, to have launched something so sophisticated, and for the average population not to understand what you've done. You know, for a long time, people call him a weak leader. That's the way they accuse him. He is infinitely smarter. He didn't drop a bomb on Putin. a physical bomb. He dropped a financial bomb. And he constructed it. And I'm going to show you how he did it. This photograph, I think, is the moment Vladimir Putin realized he was in the doo-doo. This was taken, it was taken at APEC. It's amazing how images can tell you something. Look at that photograph, right? And that was sort of moments before it really hit it. You know, he's a geopolitical grandmaster, Vladimir Putin. We all know that, we appreciate that. If you're going to be fair in life, you've got to accept that. But he did not see this oil warfare specialist coming. This is the chart of oil, and that's about a 5-year chart. Look at it. It was staying at $90, between 90 and 100, for about 4 years, from post the Lehman crash. And that's when the oil warfare started at the top there. And today we're below $50. Now, look at what's happened here. This is the Russian ruble. If the Kenya shilling had done this same move, the Kenya shilling today would be at 170 against the dollar. Imagine what you guys would be doing in this room. There would be a revolution, I reckon. That was a direct consequence of what President Obama achieved by bringing down the price of oil. Of course, there is tremendous collateral damage. Angola, Nigeria. Nigeria's currency has dropped 9%. If you go back to Druckenmiller, you've got to say to yourself, that makes no sense. It's not possible. And they can't hold it. They've got a finger in the dike. They're trying to do that. But there's a tsunami coming at them. It's already hit here. But just to give you 2 charts, to give you an example of what has happened. As long ago as 2011, Thomas Donilon, who was the, I think, he was the US National Security Advisor, was telling us that they were going to do this. He said then in 2011, America's new energy posture allows us to engage from a position of greater strength. Increasing US energy supplies act as a cushion that helps reduce our vulnerability to global supply disruptions and price shocks. It also affords us a stronger hand in pursuing and implementing our international security goals. Oil market is like this. There was 80 million barrels per day of supply, and demand was about 80.5 million. What did the US do? They started doing shale drilling, and they started storing up the oil. And they stored it, and they stored it, and they stored it, and they waited, and they waited. And then in June last year, they started calling up Nigeria, man, we don't need the oil this year. Oh, Venezuela, no, we're okay. And in June and July, you had tankers and tankers on the open seas with no buyers. And suddenly you had what is called a fire sale. A fire sale is when people say, get me out, and I don't care what the price is, right? So we had the whole thing crash. It was beautifully constructed, really sophisticated. And of course, it's worth having a look, something like, compare the ruble, the naira, and the Venezuelan currency. Venezuela has crapped out. Ruble has crapped out. The only one that hasn't is the naira. And when I hear Emefiele say, we are going to defend that naira, you know, I don't know what he's thinking. Barack Obama, in his State of the Union address, points this out, which was a few days ago. So last year we were doing the hard work of imposing sanctions along with our allies. Some suggested that Mr. Putin's aggression was a masterful display of strategy and strength. Well, today it is America that stands strong and united with our allies, while Russia is isolated with its economy in tatters, which he put into tatters, right? And why was he saying that? Because the Americans didn't get it. He was telling them, this is what I did, this is what happened, right? Other big geopolitical issue is this. Are they going to be rehabilitated? I think they are. And increasingly, I think Havana, the rapprochement with Cuba, was the aperitif for this to happen. Now, that phrase I used about an arrhythmic world, this is the Euro-Swiss franc. This currency, early in January, moved. Can you see that move? That's a huge move for the Swiss franc. It's unbelievable. I've never seen a move like this since sterling, or since the late 90s. These are very, very big, dramatic moves happening in our markets. And that's just, there's a guy I follow on Twitter who gives some very good diagrams. And basically, the Europeans are starting to print 60 billion euros a month in quantitative easing. When that announcement came out, the euro collapsed in its biggest move since 2008. That's the dark line at the bottom. So if we look at the world is, I think, infinitely more complex than it was before. I think there's a degree of arrhythmia, and that this is now being imported into the markets. And sometimes if we look, it's so unusual. We always talk about the shilling. The shilling has hardly moved. The shilling's moved about 6%. And if I take everyone's conversations, they always tell me, Aly-Khan, the shilling, the shilling. The shilling's not moving. It's these things that are moving. Which brings us to Africa. This was a conference I went to in Maputo, which was hosted by the IMF and the Mozambican government, and it was called Africa Rising. And what I would like to mention just briefly before I drill down, it was rising, everything was rising in 2012. You had a leaky boat, that thing was going up. You had another leak, sprung another leak, that was going up. Today, it's not happening in that fashion. People are more discerning, and it's a lot more challenging now. IMF put out an economic update for Africa for 2015 and 2016. They downgraded it quite hard. 2014, expecting 4.8. Previous expectation was for 5.7. And 2016, 5.2, down from 6. And these movements are being driven in part because of the oil issue, right? I mean, if you look at somewhere like Nigeria, biggest component of sub-Saharan Africa after the rebasing, revenues coming out of oil prices down 50%, you're in trouble. And essentially they've been downgraded from about 7.5 to below 5. So a little bit of a more challenging Africa-wide environment that we're facing now compared to what we were looking at 2012 and 2013. So I was thinking about what everyone talks about Africa rising, what is the big difference? I think the major difference is the phone. And what do I mean by that? Everybody in this room is on a phone. I remember a time in the 90s when I was a young boy, there were such few phones that we had. Today we have the smartphone. We are connected all over the world, and I think it's really been a silver bullet, and it's the most revolutionary thing that happened to our continent, actually, more than anything else. And it has so many different impacts, and I'm going to touch on them in a moment, but for me, more than anything, it's the phone that changed our continent. It connected us to each other, and it connected us to the rest of the world. I remember coming back 9 years ago, I had to build a 170-foot tower in Mombasa to get a 32K connection, and it was rubbish. And today, on my phone, I've got everything I can possibly want. And to me, that is a revolution in how we are. But it's creating enormous side effects, right? And let me give you a couple of examples. I think the African street, i.e. you, have a voice now, right? And we're seeing that in so many different places. This hyper-connectivity in our cities, I think, was directly responsible for events in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. Then in Kinshasa, this month alone, 42 people died in the street. What was happening in Kinshasa? The president was trying to get an extra term. He actually was first of all trying to do a census and saying that this census will take a couple of years, therefore delaying the next election, and ultimately targeting a re-election. This is what the Senate president in Congo, in Kinshasa, said. Leon Kengo Wadondo said after the vote to discard the proposed census, we have responded to the street. When has anyone in Africa responded to the street? Look at what happened with the events in Nairobi about the playground. Within half an hour, that news was on the global media, Kenyan police gassing children. Now, before, no one would have bothered. It wouldn't have made the news. Today it makes the news. It goes global within minutes. The ability of people to make a difference is there in a way which did not exist before. And we're seeing it from Ouagadougou to Kinshasa to Wilson Airport. And I think that it is a momentous moment, actually, and it is going to create a lot of political change. And what is clear to me is that the street has a voice and has muscle, and this is definitely a new development. Everyone sees it in a very binary way. Will it be a collision between the US and China in Africa? You know, if last year you couldn't not look at the news and Barack Obama was coming or the premier of China was coming. You know, I don't think we've been courted like this ever. Suddenly, you know, we're the belle of the ball. It's quite nice. The question is, in an adversarial world, is it going to be win-win? We're all winners. Everyone's a winner, baby, as Hot Chocolate used to sing. Or is it something different? And I think ultimately, you know, the win-win theory is not going to be the right one. And I think it'll become much more adversarial. And recently, for example, China put in a battalion of soldiers into South Sudan, 700 soldiers. It's the first time China has put feet on the ground, military feet on the ground on the continent. And I think that was actually an important statement and development. If I can jump now to the Indian Ocean world. Professor Felipe Fernandez Amesto, describing the Indian Ocean, why it was such an incredible trading system. The precocity of the Indian Ocean as a zone of long-range navigation and cultural exchange is one of the glaring facts of history, made possible by the reversible escalator of the monsoon. What this means is the monsoon would bring you from as far as India to Maputo and all points in between, and then it would turn around and it would take you back, all in a year. That's why the Indian Ocean economy started to pick up 400 or 500 years ago. That's why if you go to the coastal areas, you'll find incredible mixtures of people from all kinds of places. The reason they could do that was because of that wind. And Amesto is also saying, rather than be part of a once lost and anarchic continent, the area from Mozambique north to Ethiopia may be in the process of becoming a critical nodal point of the dynamic Indian Ocean world. And I think it's an interesting thing for me. If you look at that rim of the Indian Ocean, we have 3 billion people living from Maputo all the way around. That's a huge economy. And I think we're going to see a massive resurgence in that Indian Ocean economy for a number of reasons. But it's interesting that that was its historical reason of its success, and I think it's going to be resurgent again. Returning back to that point I was making about China and the US, everyone has forgotten about this document that the US put out, which was called the Pivot to Asia. And that was about President Obama moving resources into that part of Asia. And what is happening is, what we know now is the US does not need much oil anymore. Who needs it? China. China is totally dependent on imported crude oil. And their dependency is increasing. The US is decreasing. Now think about it from a military point of view. If you control the ocean, you control China. You can close China by just shutting down the ships. And therefore, in my view, in a geopolitical view, the control of the Indian Ocean is now very decisive. And from the US national interest, they want to maintain the ability to close it down. And if you go to that pivot document, the pivot document speaks about two scenarios. It speaks about having to respond to a Chinese attack, and it talks of a blinding air, sea, something or other. It's not going to happen. You can't kill millions of people. What you can do is you can close it down using coercive sanctions, like they're using on Russia. So I think therefore the Indian Ocean has become a very central area of control. Moving on, the Teflon shilling, I call it, because it just doesn't go down. Look at it. Compare it to any other currency in Africa. That red line is Ghana, which at one point was down 45%, ended the year down about 31%. The trend was all softer against the dollar, because the dollar is now emerging from a multi-year weak spot. It's going to go a lot higher. And the point I'm making is actually, when you look at the shilling is incredibly well behaved. You wouldn't believe it reading the newspaper, but actually it is. And there are reasons for that, in part, I think, because we underestimate how much money is coming in from Kenyans abroad. You know, for the central bank to collect all that information is very hard. They said $1.5 billion came in last year, which was the highest on record. I think the number is near 3. And that is where the strength of the shilling comes from. And this year it's also going to be helped because our biggest expense in our business of Kenya Inc. is oil. We're paying half what we were paying before. That's going to make a very, very positive difference because we don't have to find so many dollars. So I think, you know, overall, shilling is going down 95, 96 maybe, but that is not a shilling story. It's a story about the dollar. And the dollar is going to come back very, very strong this year. And the first rate increase out of the Fed is going to send these currencies much lower. And it doesn't even have to be up 1%. It could be a quarter point. That quarter point will put a lot of pressure. And that will be the second round of pressure. If President Obama really wants to send Russia over the edge, put up interest rates a quarter point. And you'll see what will happen. For us, last year was incredible. If you'd gone to somebody and said, can the government of Kenya borrow $2.75 billion in the international markets? Everybody said, you're smoking pot. What are you talking about? 2.75 billion? We raised $2.75 billion from the capital markets. It was a huge, huge call. And I think it speaks to an opening up. And it also has very positive knock-on effects. Our corporate sector can now go and say, I want to borrow money, we've got a benchmark bond out here, I'll pay you 50 basis points extra. And suddenly we've got a whole different financial architecture around us. And I think we can't underestimate the degree of progress that has happened in our financial markets. And I give full credit because I remember not too long ago when the place was a bit of a mess after, you know, the big IPOs in 2007. You know, we had there's been a lot of reform. They're now talking of a futures market coming into play. Lots of positive things coming out of our capital markets. This was obviously a very, very big thing. And what this does is twofold, and it's having a very dynamic change. What it's doing, it means our policymakers have to be aware of what these bonds are doing. What it means is bondholders now have the ability to price our credit on a continuous basis. If policymakers pop up and make a bad policy or an extreme policy, the price of these bonds is going to react very quickly. And this is what's happened to Ghana. You know, Ghana made classic mistakes. It was this poster child. If you went around 2-3 years ago, it was all Ghana. President Obama went to Ghana. Everyone was going to Ghana. Where is it now? Right? What did they do? They borrowed billions of dollars of Eurobonds and they put their own salaries up. Right? In reality, that's what actually happened. So the bond is a very big positive, and I also think it will have a positive impact on policy making because suddenly you won't be able to do the highly irrational things. Coming to us in Kenya, carrying on with us, this is I think, you know, the interesting statistic I came across from McKinsey. McKinsey put out something called igdp. The component of GDP that is internet, new economy, mobile money, you know, the more sexy parts of this of any economy. And they put our igdp at 2.9%, which is the same level as France and Germany. They had South Africa at 1.4, Nigeria at 0.8. And I think this is a major piece of strength of our economy. I am bullish about our economy because of these sorts of things. We're not oil. By the way, oil is dead. Takana oil, if they're fighting about it, I don't know what they're fighting about, because no one's digging it out of the ground at this price. We have to come back, for that oil exploration to come back, $80. $80, we're nowhere near it right now. The markets have already reacted. You look at the share price of Tullow, you look at the, if Tullow, Africa Oil and Afren were listed at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, they would be the worst performing shares over the last 12 months, bar none, right? I mean, Afren has fallen 97%. You put 100 bob, you got 3 bob left, buddy, right? You put into Tullow 100 bob, I think it's about 45 bob. Africa Oil 100 bob, 25 bob. Now, markets are telling you something loud and clear. So that's just a point to make, and I think people that maybe have not yet internalized that story delayed, 5 years delay, according to my best estimate. But where we're losing on that side, we're winning on another side. Why are we winning? Well, I'm not winning because everyone's got their car on the road now because the price has come down. But the point I'm making is that extra money in people's pocket, don't underestimate it. It's a lot of money. In the US, it's worth $1 trillion. It's worth $750 per household per year. I estimate here it's worth about $1 a day when we get the price feed through, which has to come through. Next month will be down another 10 bob, and we'll get there eventually to probably 60 shillings a litre if everything was fair. You can imagine how that's going to help our economy. People are going to have a lot more money in their pocket. Hopefully they won't only drive around with that money, they'll invest it. Returning to igdp, this is for me one of the big strengths of our economy, and I think you can't underestimate what a strong support it is. You know, if you look at any kind of data across the continent, we are so far away ahead of it. We're a leader, or as Malcolm Gladwell calls it, an outlier. You know, average urban internet usage is 25%. We're at 47. This room is at 100, right? I mean, you know, or 99. I'm off it. And if you look at the ICT component of the economy, that has been the strongest growing part of the economy. If you stripped out ICT and that igdp of our economy, we didn't grow for 10 years. This was the area of growth. If you took everything out, the economy was actually very, very flat. It was this piece that added the juice. And you see that in social media, you see that in the conversation we have. This is the volume of tweets taken, I think it was in about 2012. And we were actually on par with Egypt and South Africa. And Egypt, bear in mind, was having a revolution at that time, so everybody was tweeting. There's lots of debate about digital, about the migration. I don't know about the minutiae of that migration, but I think in a general way, what's happening is people have gone from broad to narrow. By broad, I mean, once upon a time, we all watched The Voice of Kenya, right? I don't know if you remember, we'd have the national anthem, we'd know whether the president had been to the toilet, and then we'd find the news, you know? But you remember, you know, it's today, it was those old days, but no one is watching media like that anymore, whether they're in New York or Nairobi. We're watching it in a totally different way. You know, we're spending more time in the niches. We're going to areas that we were interested in. We're watching it when we want to watch it. We are interacting with each other. Somebody will send me a tweet. Have you seen this? Peter will send me a tweet. Have you watched the FT? Have you seen this? And then I'll go and watch it. This is a whole different way of operating. And it's very revolutionary, I think. And people prefer the niches because it's more immersive. If you're like a windsurfer, what's the voice of Kenya going to tell you about it? But some guy will have a TV channel which will be purely focused on windsurfing that you can go and immerse yourself in, or with Sadia's music, you want to follow that, there you go. And I think that has also changed it from a societal point of view. Now, coming to us, what's going to happen? There's tourism. I'm from Mombasa. I was down there, and I was playing Spot the Mzungu Tourist. I couldn't spot any, right? So when people tell me it's coming back, it's not coming back right now. Why? Because I've sat in London. People book a holiday 12 months in advance. They'll tell you for 12 months, I'm going here. And they'll be excited about it. That's how that market works. It's not you know, not many people are doing it spur of the moment. They're planning it way ahead. And until we see some improvement in security, and I don't think anyone can predict when that improvement will happen. Until that happens, I don't see how Mombasa is going to recover. And I remember Mombasa in the late 90s. And I used to live in Yali, and there was a time when everything was for sale. And I'm really worried about Mombasa because I think everybody's not considering the situation. I mean, there were hotels down there where I sat down, and there was semi-full, and the guy said, I got 4 rooms sold. My hotel cost me $250,000 a month. These guys cannot keep going. It's not possible. And the worry is that actually it gets worse before it gets better. And I think this is the drag on the economy this year. Al-Shabaab, if you looked in 2014, just do a chart analysis or numbers analysis, I mean, it was a much, much bigger impact than it was the previous year, the year before, the year before. So and that trend line, whether you're looking at it Africa-wide, you're looking at it globally, or you're honing in and saying, what about us? That remains an uncertainty, or what we can call it an unknown known. We know it's there, but what's unknown is what's going to happen next. And then counterbalancing this is what's supporting us is this opening up of the capital markets, our ability to access cash, which wasn't there before. And that makes the challenge for us different. Before, you wouldn't get the money. Today you can get the money, but you've now got to spend it wisely and do well with it. If you've got $2.75 billion of bonds and you're paying interest on it of 5–6%, your return has got to be significantly above with that money. If out of the 2.75 you say, hang on a second, we'll give 300 over here, 200 here, and you're left with 1 billion to invest, you're never going to make it. You're going to end up in the problems that we've had before. So it's a different challenge, but it's a better challenge, but it is a challenge. And I think the big thing this year is going to be this massive stimulus coming from oil, which is why, if I go back to the stock exchange, 3-year bull market, it's going to be a 4th year, in my view. If I'm already seeing hard data out of corporates, they're already seeing a boost from this lower oil price. So imagine if we get down to 60, what we're going to see.
Yeah, my name is Patrick. My question is, what is your take on Africa's move to quit from ICC?
ICC and Ebola.
ICC, Ebola, and terrorism. What is the way ahead? What's your take on that?
Okay.
Hi, my name is Jesse.
Hey, Jesse.
I just wanted to find out what is happening with India. What is the space of India in all this geopolitics?
This year we've seen Chad ask AU's help on dealing with Boko Haram, and Cameroon is going down the same way. Are we going to wait for the regional bodies, AU and maybe ECOWAS? Is it going to wait for Nigeria to call for help? Or is there anything that these bodies can do to prevent the insurgency from expanding?
So, if I'm honest, if we look at these very big supranational agencies, and particularly with the ICC, where most of the cases are in Africa, and we can't really hand on heart say that all the crimes are happening on our continent. There are crimes happening everywhere. And it seems to me that the challenge for us as Africans is that I have a lot of faith in that institution. In fact, I think, if I look back at it, the positive effect that came out for me was that, I don't think politicians would really risk their careers doing similar things now. So it has changed the behavior, I think. And I think that's positive. In terms of what I disagree with is I think essentially it's very Africa focused. And I think there's plenty of other criminals around that need to be taken to court. And why don't they go and try and do that? So that's my issue with them. I think the challenge here is a political challenge for us, is that one case has gone away, is the other case going to go away as well? And if it doesn't, what happens? I think that's the way I read it. Ebola is very interesting. It's sort of, what I find interesting is exponential, potentially exponential. What do I mean by exponential? It's when something can go from 1 to 10 to 100 to 10,000 to 1 million very, very quickly. That's called an exponential curve. And I'm glad that we've had some very positive news lately, that it seems as if it's coming down. You know, I think Ebola, in many ways, our response was poor as Africans. I think we relied on everybody else. We didn't deal with it. These were remote parts of our continent. And I think we have to learn from that. We have to react in a more coordinated way. And then that brings me back, you know, we were very aggressive at fighting the ICC at an AU level, but we were not as aggressive as fighting Ebola, I think, at that kind of level. In fact, I didn't see much of a response. With terrorism, and you know, if you look at terrorism across the continent, you look everywhere, there's more of it. And let me turn it another way around. There's 7 billion people here in the world. If 1% or even less of that 7 billion are not happy, they have the power with the internet to create tremendous damage. And there are a meaningful number of people. It's not a small number. 1% of 7 billion is what? 700 million, 70 million. Let's take 0.1%, 7 million. 0.01, 700,000 people. 0.001 is 70,000 people. We're talking about a very small number of people that are creating fear and havoc. I think we are responding to it in a very strange way. It's particularly Europe. 3 days, 17 people died. I'm very, very sorry about it. Really, I am. But I'm also thinking, if no one in England would have published that kind of thing, they wouldn't have done it. And so why? So you know, in a way, it was baiting. It was looking for some kind of reaction. And I'm sure there were communications beforehand saying, don't try it. If you do it, we'll do something. And they did it. So horrible thing that happened. But I'm saying that how do we deal with this? In 3 days, we've got, you know, we're sitting there, they're all marching. It was a fake march, by the way, because there was no one behind them. They'd gone to a secure street, if you actually saw what came out later. The biggest issue for me on national security and terrorism is this. I think national security has been a budget that has had the least oversight in every African country. It's been the budget which you can use to fund your political campaigns. You can say, national security. No one can look at it, right? Now think of it, if it's been happening for a number of years, we are behind the curve. Investments we said we were making, we probably didn't make. We probably bought faulty equipment when we should have bought some good equipment. Somebody made $100 million, funded a political campaign. We're way behind. We've got, you know, I look at sometimes our guys, I mean, until recently, they're communicating on a mobile phone. In Yali, I got robbed, he said, come and pick me up, the policeman. I mean, what are we talking about, right? If the policeman wants to be picked up, what else is happening that we don't know about? So I think there's a gap there, and I'll be honest about it. And I think, you know, we as citizens have got to be honest about it and say to us, what is the budget? Where are you spending it on? Let's see it. And don't cloak it in some sort of cloak, oh, it's national security. India is the coming country under Narendra Modi. It overtakes China GDP in 2 years' time. It's going to be growing faster. I might disagree with Modi, some of what happened in Gujarat, but I think Modi has flicked a switch. I think the Indians have got a leader that they're getting behind. I think he's tapped into his people, and I think he's got, you know, that ingredient going, that magic ingredient, and which all politicians want to try and achieve, which is and I think it's quite extraordinary. And I think that that India will be the story for the next 5 years, particularly out of the BRICS. Brazil in trouble, Russia in trouble, China in India, and South Africa. South Africa's there more as a favor because they wanted some, you know, but in terms of economic size, it's not justified, is it? It's not justified on economic size, I don't think. So in that context, I think the story in BRICS is going to be actually a very Indian story in the next few years. And I think Modi has really made tremendous strides, and I give him credit for that. With respect to Boko Haram and ECOWAS, well, first of all, I wonder, how do these guys like Boko Haram, where do they afford to get this equipment? You know, there is something behind it that maybe we're not told about. And, you know, I think, you know, there are lots of theories about Boko Haram. But, I mean, if you look at land control, how much they're now operating over, you look at the intensity of their attacks, you know, it's gone up like that. And it remains a very, very big concern for me. And I think the bigger issue for me in Nigeria is I think the elite in Lagos and Abuja are divorced from the reality up north. That's why, I mean, even a simple thing like commiserating with your people, it took Good Luck Jonathan a week. You're saying to yourself, isn't someone slapping him? Say, just say something. Say you're sorry. But you can't just shut up. And I think that sort of, slow response time is a signifier of the issue that is in Nigeria. Can ECOWAS, do they have the military wherewithal or the experience to deal with this? I'm not sure. I mean, if you read sort of reports about the Nigerian army, they're not, you know, they're not as complimentary as they might be.
My name is O'Brien.
Hi.
O'Brien. Hey. Recently, the African Union elected Mugabe as the chair of the African Union. What does that portend for Africa economically? Thank you.
Ooh.
I heard we are so proud about our GDP, we are so proud about our economic status right now, but I wonder about the status of the Kenyan, the native Kenyan. We're giving all tenders to foreign companies. What is the effect on our local companies? A typical example is University of Nairobi's tower. I was asking some students.
This one that's near the Norfolk.
Yeah, I was asking some students, we are proud of engineers that we are training in University of Nairobi, but why do we tender China alone? Why can't we give even one student as an intern to even learn how to build these things? How many Kenyans are so proud of Thika Superhighway, but they can't afford fare to use the same highway? So what's the effect? The GDP is so good. What's the effect on the Kenyan, the local Kenyan, the native? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Deto. Last year, S&P advised Kenyan banks to sort of take advantage of the credit rating. What are your broad impressions in regards to this? And also, just a follow-through question. Would you consider some stocks to be overpriced? My second question will be, when you look at the market currently, how would you describe the effect of quantitative easing on frontier markets? Thank you.
I'll come back to some other questions. President Mugabe, someone's tweeted, I think his name is Mohammed Welie, he's always tweeting, he's tweeted a photograph of President Mugabe sleeping. and he said our new African Union leader is twice the average age of the average African. It's more than twice. If you think of the average age is 21, we're talking about 4.5 times. This is really an extreme, this is the most extreme leadership age gap I can think of. You know, I go back and I've got admiration for Robert Mugabe. I think he was a very powerful freedom fighter. I think extremely articulate man. But, you know, if you look at someone like Zimbabwe, which was the breadbasket of that part of Africa, you look at the people, you look at how much the economy has suffered, he was right. The British did promise him money and then they reneged on it. But at the end of the day, you can't hold a whole country hostage. I believe in Sun Tzu. You know your enemy's there, but if you keep fighting them head on, you're taking more damage. So work out a way to deal with the situation instead of just churning out this sort of liberation theology in the year 2015, which hardly anybody has had the same experience as you, because they were born in a free country and all they want to do is eat and get a job and get a better life and look after their kids, like everybody in the world wants to do. We don't, you know, whether you're in Timbuktu, Nairobi or London, you know, our ambitions are pretty much the same. We want to elevate ourselves. We want to have a safe, secure family. We want to have opportunities for our children, right? It's not rocket science. And to deny that to people because of an argument at this level, I think is not right. In passing, I'll also mention that President Mugabe's central bank was the first central bank in the recent economic period to try quantitative easing. It didn't work for them. Why did it work elsewhere? Because they started printing money like crazy. And of course, it created a huge inflationary spike, something that people expected to happen in all these other countries, in the US, etc., but it didn't. And from an economic point of view, it's quite interesting why it didn't. But I think that's too long a thing to look at now. But I think, you know, I would have liked a fresher face at the AU. I would have liked someone who's, you know, more of in our generation, someone who could speak our language, who could excite us. But, you know, we're a country, we're a continent that has challenges. It's never going to be linear. Things change will happen over time. And I like to think that, you know, this is probably the last hurrah of that generation that fought so hard to get us our independence. But, you know, I think I would prefer somebody else right now at the helm who's more plugged in. You know, someone like Kagame. Who you know has other challenges, but in terms of delivering, that model is working, right? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, economic growth is happening. People are getting lifted out of poverty. If you look at the hardcore data, there is no other country but Rwanda that has made such a fantastic improvement, and it's been very, very well thought out and implemented. And I think for me that would have been a better choice. Regarding local content, regarding our participation in our economy, which was the question you were asking, you know, my philosophy is this, and I suppose because, you know, I think we have to be global citizens. I think in order to succeed in this world, we need to be globally fluent. Why are places like Dubai, they're fluent. Anyone can turn up, you can set up a business, you can get moving. That's global fluency. And I think that is a very, very, you know, we're living in an interconnected world. We cannot be, you know, too nationalistic, otherwise we're going to get bogged down. And therefore, I think we've got to look at the world. We can't ignore it. I think what the government is trying to do to address your issue in particular is via what is called local content legislation. Local content legislation means that where a big company like the Chinese contractor has to give out a percentage of their contracts to local operators. How that will be implemented, I think the idea is good. There are some challenges because one of the oil and gas people were telling me, you know, we need an expert in this. Do you know how many people have expertise in this? In Kenya, 0. So how am I going to do it? So, you know, so there are challenges that you've got to work with, and at times I think in that environment, you need policy-making flexibility. Policymakers need to see, okay, this isn't working, I can tweak it to make it work better. It is when our policymakers become very stuck and rigid. So for example, just going off from this, take Senator beer. Senator beer was a very cheap beer. There was a tax remission on it. It was being sold for about 50 bob. Good market, growth business, growing. You drive on that from the airport, you go around to Kiambu, there'll be hundreds of people, businesses, whatever. Government says, no, we're going to take the tax off, put the tax back on, and we're going to collect 7.2 billion shillings, right? They took the tax off, 91% of sales were lost, they didn't collect a shilling, they even stopped collecting because people went out of business. Now, in that environment that you're dealing with, in a country like ours, you've got to be quicker and sharper, right? So what do? You look at the situation, it's not working, I'm changing tack, right? And do it real quick. Because to me, that is better policy making than saying, I'll think about it in 6 months' time. By that time, 30,000 people have lost jobs. They've gone and got something else going, or they're trying to. So I think when you look at a frontier economy like ourselves, it requires better policy making than in developed nations. Because there, you know, the differences are marginal. Here, the impact of making a mistake is so huge. You know, if you thought you're going to get 7 billion shillings and you're getting nothing, you've got a problem, right? Deal with it. But you can't be rigid, I think. So I think local content is what's designed to do that. It's not an optimal situation right now, but I think there's going to be quite a lot of improvement in that regard, I hope. S&P, the credit rating, because of the Eurobond, essentially brings us into the universe. It's like we were outside, it's over the line, we issue the bond, international markets are now pricing Kenya, therefore they can come in and they can price the corporate sector much more easily. It's a step-by-step process. So what I think we're going to see as a consequence of that is a lot more issuance by our corporate companies. And you know, I think Joshua at Mindspeak told us he was looking at doing a Eurobond. You know, everybody's looking at it. It will happen soon, and we will see a positive knock-on effect. The impact of quantitative easing in frontier markets, I think there has definitely been an impact. And what happened was, you know, going back to that little documentary I showed you, where that guy was saying all this quantitative easing money didn't go into people's pockets. It went into the financial markets. Some of that money from the financial markets ended up here, right? Because they were getting practically free money. And it had quite a big, strong correlation between quantitative easing and our frontier markets. If you look at the frontier indices, they really outperformed in this snapshot period that I'm talking about. And I think a lot of that was driven by this liquidity that came looking for higher yielding assets. And more so, the European quantitative easing, I think, is going to help South Africa, because South Africa has very close ties, trading ties with Europe, as we do as well. But I think the European money will find it easier to come to South Africa than necessarily Kenya. And you're already seeing that in the stock market as well.
I think you mentioned that you are bullish with regard to the stock market for the current year. Could you please elaborate and give us a sense of what are the factors which make you bullish? Thank you.
You talk about the shale. Sorry, my name is Ravi.
Hi, Ravi. Oh, you're Ravi.
Yeah.
Good to meet you.
In America, the shale gas phenomenon, how long can it last?
Okay.
And we have Kenya Airways here, which is obviously having its own issues. But they're still looking at new markets. I think yesterday they announced they're going to fly to Vietnam. What is to Vietnam? I think there was some news. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on Kenya?
On KQ. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Khan.
Pleasure.
I'm Joel Obengo. Now, I wanted to hear your opinion on the effectiveness of AU interventions in African crisis. And in particular, I want you to focus on the case of Northern Mali.
Northern Mali.
Northern Mali.
Okay, good question.
Where we had an uprising in 2012.
Yep.
And even though African Union has institutions like Peace Security Council, we have Africa Peace Security Architecture, we have so many mechanisms, tools, and institutions, Africans were largely absent in Mali, and the military success in Northern Mali was attributed to French participation. How do you see, in an effort to have African solution to African problems, is it feasible without foreign intervention? Thank you.
No, interesting question. Okay, so let me just...
and I also wanted to share with you, I've authored a paper which was published 3 days ago by University of Tokyo on the same, and one is coming in May from US China Public Management Journal on the same. I'll welcome your relationship.
And yeah, please share it when it comes out. I think your question first about the stock market, why am I bullish? And the stock market is coming off a 3-year bull run. Stock prices in Nairobi have been up 144%, excluding dividends, in 3 years. Even if you take in, let's say, a 10% devaluation, the shilling over that period, that's discounted by any dividends you would have had. So we're in the top 10 over the last 3 years. And that's a tremendous outcome. So the reasons driving my bullishness are the following. I think there's a lot of money still coming into frontier markets. Bear in mind that, you know, I would say a lot of the stock market rally has happened not because of us in this room, it's happened because of international investors. They have been on the buy side for 3 continuous years. And that's why you've seen this outperformance of the big stocks like Safaricom, EABL, because these are stocks that they're able to buy. They have criteria, normally capitalization, turnover, and so forth. I think that trend will continue. Plus, I think we're going to be supported by what I call displacement. Money that was being directed to Lagos is not going to Lagos. It's coming to other places. It's coming here and it's coming south. So for example, this year in January, Lagos was the worst performing stock market in the world. It was down nearly 15%. Compare that to here, we're up 2%. South Africa's up 2.5%. So I think the big thing is, the big driver has been international money that has come in. I think that international money will continue to come in, but whereas some of it was going to Nigeria, it's not going there, and therefore some of it has come here as well. We had a good January in part because of uncertainty around capital gains tax, meant locals were not selling. They were sort of sitting and saying, I'll think about it, let me see what happens. So there wasn't very much supply. That pushed up the market as people came in to buy it. I think the economic stimulus coming from oil is going to be extremely supportive. My calculation is, and this is probably the highball calculation, but if the price comes to where it should, and the workings of the Energy Regulatory Commission are at times mysterious, because we don't get the prices that we should expect, and they keep mentioning the shilling, and I want to send him a chart of the shilling and say, well, look at it, and now tell me. But once that comes in, that means per litre of fuel, you're spending 40 shillings less than you were a year ago, per litre. Now, how many litres are you putting in your car? So even at the bottom, the guy who's using it for kerosene, the guy everyone has to use fuel in some shape or form. It is, in my view, the fairest, most grassroots stimulus you could probably have. Compare it to quantitative easing, for example, which is totally, we don't know where these flows are going. Here we know that people are going to have it in their back pocket. If you go back to the last time the economy did really well, 2006, 2007, fastest rate of growth was just before the election in 2007, when we were growing at 7.1% on an annualized basis. That quarter, we actually grew at around 10%, if you just took it as a quarter. What happened at that time, I'll tell you, oil prices were low, food prices were low. This economy is driven not by the millionaires, it's driven by the guy in the street. That guy in the street's got 20 bob more to spend on his airtime. He's got 50 bob more to spend on a beer. That's what I'm waiting for. That's going to be a very, very big boost. And it's going to feed into a lot of these corporates. So it is those 3 or 4 things which are sort of making me bullish. And then, of course, I look at price action. I think, you know, a market can tell you whether it's strong or whether it's weak and how it behaves. And our market is behaving in a strong manner. So I'm looking for a 4th year of gains, obviously. I'm looking for a big gain here. The best performing stock market in Africa, would you believe it, is actually Egypt. Since CC came in, that stock market has just roared. If the stock market was making a decision on CC, we know what it would be. So Egypt best, just to contextualize it for you. Tanzania did very well last year. People keep underestimating Tanzania, but Tanzania was the first to lift limits on foreign ownership percentages last year. They've opened up the capital markets. Nigeria, obviously, under a lot of pressure, continued to be under pressure. And South Africa, which is the 4th entry point, Did quite well last year, and I think will do okay this year. They got different challenges, however, but as a destination for international investors, South Africa is very easy. People feel comfortable about it because they're very deep in liquid markets. KQ, interesting question, Ravi. So there's been a massive airline stock rally. Why? Fuel is 1/3 of the expense item for an airline, if not more. Right? We know that. If the oil prices come down, you're paying half, you got a massive, massive profit coming. Now, the issue with Kenya Airways was the following. How much had they hedged their fuel? Right? They had hedged it when the market was up there at $100. So there, no one is absolutely certain. Are you paying $48 today, or are you paying $100 still? That was the uncertainty. And we haven't had clarity on the hedge book. Until we see that exactly, but overall, I think that Kenya Airways is further to go, returning from a bombed out position. It was way down. I think, it's up about 27% this month, second only to Mumias, which is up 47%. I think someone else was asking me about the market. The market is a trading market. You can't just buy something and sit and wait. I think you've got to trade in and out. Opportunities are presenting themselves. It's a little bit different to 2012, 2013. I think KQ has still got further to go. Going to your shale question, and we are like the shale producers. We're the target as well, and we've been knocked out. Bear that in mind, right? Everyone's saying shale, when are they being knocked out? Our oil has been knocked out. We are the collateral damage. Our oil exploration has gone. What were the Saudis trying to do? They were trying to knock everybody out, right? And they've done it. So, I mean, if people focus on shale, ours are knocked out, be clear. What did the American shale producers do? They hedged. That chart I showed you, let me just show it to you again. Sorry. See, when the price was here, the forward curve was going up to here. You could have sold at this time, you could have sold your oil in 2016, 2017, 2018 for $90. Now what did the shale producers? They did that. So they're sitting there, the majority of shale producers are locked in. They're going to keep pumping. Pump, baby, pump, because we're selling at $90. We don't care. The price could be at 40. We don't give a hoot. What did our people do? Nigeria, South Sudan, Angola, they never did anything. Today, they are selling at whatever the market is prepared to pay them, if it is prepared to pay them. So in terms, right? If you look at financial management, it's outrageously bad. You could have locked it in. What were you waiting there for? 110? 120? Man, you had a whole country to manage. You had it at 90. Worst case, South Sudan. Think about it. They agreed a fixed deal with Khartoum, $11 per barrel, when the price was $100. What is it now? 45. They're still paying 11. Right? That's just Khartoum. Is there any money in South Sudan? No. Is there a currency shortage? Yeah. What's going to happen? There's nothing left in that pot, right? It's frightening. Nigeria, huge economy, sophisticated people, banks all over the world. Why are they coming and crying now? You had 4 years, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013. Donilon was telling you in 2011, I'm going to hammer the oil price. Right? So my point is, the point I'm coming back with is, this is value addition, right? If we're always saying our coffee is not being valued, what do we do with our oil? We didn't add value, we didn't hedge. So all these other guys are sitting there. Some of them, okay, 6 months, some of them 9 months, some of them 12 months, but they're locked in. They don't care. And I'm sure Saudi Arabia and a few of these other guys did some of this as well, because it would be a natural thing to do. So looking at Kenya Airways is one side, but then you come and look at this other side, you can see what's happened here as well. And I think it speaks to a lack of sophistication among some of are economic leaders. Like no one, I mean, I've been looking to see if even a country hedged 10% or 20%. This is my health budget, this is my education budget. Why don't I lock that up? And I've got that covered, right? Today, you got Angola running around looking for money. Everyone is looking for money. I mean, they're paying crazy rates. And then, sorry, the last question was, and I can't read my own writing now. Sorry, can anyone remind me what was? Yes, will you? Oh. Mali. Yes. What is the correlation between what's going on in North Africa, the increased insurgency, and events in 2011? I think this whole mess, and I disagree with Muammar Gaddafi on many things. I mean, you know, but at the same time, I think the overthrow of Gaddafi directly relates to this surge that we're seeing in that part of Africa. I mean, the guy had a lid on it. You might have disagreed with how the lid was working, but he had a lid on it. When the lid got taken off, it got much, much worse. And it spilled over. And I think that's what's happened. Other forces at work as well. But at the same time, I think Gaddafi, interestingly, was a force of stability in that part of the world, which no one recognized. And then if you look at that intervention in Libya, and you look at it for what it was, it really was not an uprising. It was a manufactured uprising in Benghazi, right? Where you put in a lot of people, you start shooting around, and then you have this. It's a model that's working, by the way. It's been working in the last few years. Putin calls it color revolutions, whatever you want to call it, but it is highly effective and it works. So I see the uncertainty in North Africa in part a consequence of the fall of Colonel Gaddafi. I think that was a lid that was on there which has been taken off. With respect to our ability to deal with that, you know, let's take, for example, how we have dealt with, how we're currently dealing here with Al-Shabaab. You know, how many Al-Shabaab guys are there running around this country? 400, 500, 100, dedicated to do damage. It's a criminal enterprise. Go and find them as criminals. But don't sweep through 2 million people, alienate everybody. That's not the right approach, I don't think. I think that you need the support of those communities. You need me to come and say, actually, I'm not comfortable with this guy. I don't know what he's doing. But if I feel that you're picking on everybody, I'm not going to come and have that conversation with you. And I think that's the fundamental misfire for me in terms of our approach. And I think in general, so I'm worried about that. I think I call it the insurgency tail risk. Nassim Taleb, the tail risk is the risk of very, very, very bad outcomes. It's normally tiny, but it can expand. And I call it Africa's insurgency tail risk, and I think it continues to gain strength. Will we need the help of other parties? I think we do, really. If you go back to the comments I said about underspending in national security, the level of sophistication amongst our partners like France, UK, US, you know, I think in a world of collaboration we need as much help as we can. And how that plays out, we'll have to wait and see.
My name is Martina from True North Leadership. And thank you, because I think we could actually all come here every Saturday and just listen to you, because you've got so much to give.
Thank you.
I'm thinking in regard to also to local content, but on an African level. Now we now have the crisis, or we've had the crisis. It's still going on with Ebola in West Africa, and not just West Africa. Actually, it's affected all of us, even here economically. There's going to be a lot happening once it's over, and that's rebuilding the economies. What I see is that China has been going in there forcefully, the US has been going in there forcefully. I'm sure that they have a secondary gain that they want to obtain, which is not just saving people's lives, but also getting the business that's in there afterwards. I don't think you do that for free. There's no free lunch. So where do you see African countries going in. I mean, we produce food, we produce all these things that could actually be needed there, but are we going to get a part of that rebuilding? I mean, we see all the extra produce from Europe and the US coming here. When are we going to take charge and actually using our own resources?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. I think, well, just to mention one point, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and what was the other one? Guinea, are about the size of 1/3 of Afghanistan in terms of economy, just to give you a picture of it. So these were economies emerging out of conflict, which were actually some of the fastest growing economies in Africa because of the low base effect. You know, you were able to grow very, very quickly. You know, is it you know, everyone, I think there's this naivety that sometimes we have, particularly with the Chinese, that somehow the Chinese are coming there to write us checks for fun, you know. No one is coming here to write us checks for fun. Let's be serious. Everybody has got their national interest at heart. I think we don't have as much of a national interest concept as others who are coming here. This is our problem. We are 54 countries. We're all speaking with different voices. You want to go speak to China? One destination. The whole of the people, Xi Jinping. You want to go and speak to the USA? President Obama. You want to come to speak to Africa? Where do you start? Who do you start with? Right? This is a challenge. When you're dealing with our people, are we conscious of the national interest? You know, our arguments at times, you know, what our problems occur are when we're not thinking about the national interest, when people are thinking about themselves. You know, it creates a huge problem. So I think that to me is a challenge that we're facing, and I think we've got to work out how do we coordinate ourselves better and say exactly what we want in a better manner, because other people who are coming here are very clear about what they want, right? I mean, we know what they want, and they're not coming here to, you know, there is, to me, everyone talks about aid and trade, and aid is an economic tool, right? There is also a final situation where you see people dying, you want to help. That's right, that happens, that's the world. Bob Geldof can go and sing a song and we can all help, and it's good. But at the same time, people are now tying their aid to trade. They will aid a place if they can think, we'll do this, we'll get something out of it, we'll make a better return. So I think what we've got to do is just work out what people are trying to achieve. Let's not be naive and assume that, you know, that the Chinese premier turned up here because of business, but whereas he's got about 90 people locked up, he's trying to get them out. I'm sure that was what it was about. But, you know, let's not be naive. Let's look at it for what it is. And let's, you know, let's look at China, the US, and deal with everybody. Because for us to throw our bet with one group is the road to disaster. We need to be able to deal in a multipolar world with everybody and work out who can offer us the best option at that time. China offered us the best option, the railway, fantastic, let's do it. I drove up and down that road. By the way, that railway is what's underpinning the economy in 2015. A ton of activity going on down that road. Every 30 kilometers, there was something happening. I was quite surprised. And I think that is what's giving the economy a boost this year. Think of the Thika superhighway, and you're going to get a replication effect with the railway. Might not be exactly the same, but it's going to be a similar multiplier type thing. I think we should also have some kind of, you know, dual carriageway from Mombasa. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. That is the artery. I drive down there, you see Rwanda, you see all these trucks going all across. Why have we only got such a small road? I think that's, if I was looking to do something simple, I'd just do that. But I see the railway as being a very, very supportive part. And just finishing off with your point, I think, you know, our challenges, all of us as Africans, is how do we get our voice heard? How do we coordinate better? And how do we always have this idea of what is best for everybody and not what is just best for me at this time? Because, you know, if you look at it, people can get bought off for very little. When the economic benefit's $100 million and you take $1 million, you're leaving $100 million on the table for somebody else. And that's not going to where it should be going. And those sorts of mistakes accumulate and become very, very expensive over time, I think.
Hello, my name is Javan Pamba. I was listening to Jim Rogers. He started with George Soros, the Quanta Fund.
Yes.
When before everybody else knew what a hedge fund was. He was saying that he's optimistic about sub-Saharan Africa, particularly because agriculture can be done here. Very fertile, don't even need to work that hard. But the problem is when you come to Kenya, and most of African countries, we've neglected agriculture. We are looking at big infrastructure projects. Like right now, they're saying oil is gone. Let's forget about it. But our government is still building an oil pipeline. See there the conflict of interest. And we are using debt to build that thing. So you see, it's like we have neglected one agriculture, which by the still earns Kenya a lot of money, at the expense of oil, which is gone. And also the other question is, how do most African countries balance between the relationship between the West and the East? When uncertainties come, like right now, Nigeria was happy, last year GDP rebased, we were bigger than South Africa.
It's like Shakespeare, isn't it?
Yeah?
It's like Shakespeare, you're king of the world, and boom.
Everybody is happy. The other day you would turn up the TV, CCTV, you see the finance minister saying, it's time to diversify the economy. It can be done through taxes. You don't diversify an economy through taxes. You diversify through investment.
Yeah.
You wake up one morning, today, like the way Putin and Obama are fighting, like every other time, when America has been the dominant power since, for the last 60 years, after Britain collapsed, after people said, we are done with the British pound, let's go to America after fighting Germans 2 world wars. Britain was done after 100 years of success. Today, Jim Rogers says America is like the largest debtor in history. And he doesn't see how the world is moving east. That's where the money is. And right now, most African countries are not looking at where the money really is, on how to deal with the people with the money. Like the Asians, where like a country like Singapore doesn't have agriculture. Kenya has a lot of agriculture, but we still haven't looked that way. We are still trying to balance, waiting to see. And while the world tomorrow, as a result of Putin fighting with America, tomorrow everybody may say, we are done with the US dollar. Let's go to yuan. And it causes chaos here, everybody trying to rush to the yuan again. How do you think that our politicians are ready to prepare to such factors?
That's an interesting question. I think our politicians have got to be globally fluent. They've got to be able to balance East and West. Just to take you back to your point you were making about East having the money. In our Eurobond, $2.75 billion worth of Eurobond, do you know who bought most of that? America. They bought 2/3. 66% was bought by North Americans. 1% was bought by China. But that will change because China has not really come into the capital markets in Africa. It's a relatively new phenomenon. They're going to come, but I'm just pointing that out. I think Africa, we have two choices. Either we turn away from the world or we turn our face to the world. And out of all the Africans I've met, including myself, I think we all want to be a part of the world. That's a part of our story as well. But I think we've got to be clever at how if somebody's better at something, fine, get them in. If the Chinese want to build our roads, build our roads. What do we need as a country to progress? What are our key priorities? And then get the best people for that job. That's my theory, and I think that can work. I would push it in that direction. You were sort of asking about sort of big moves at the global scale and how they come and impact us. I mean, this is what I was saying. I think we are more interconnected than ever before. And we see those interconnection points very, very easily. I was using the Russian ruble, but Nigeria could have been an example that I could have used of that. That is an oil war launched somewhere else, which is deeply, deeply affecting other parts on the continent. So I believe the interconnection is the highest it's ever been. We're all on a mobile phone. I mean, I was thinking to myself, 20 years ago, if I was in Mombasa, how many people would I communicate with in a day? And how many am I communicating with now? And it's just exponential, I could be tweeting with somebody, Sadia or Peter, could be somebody, or Ravi, it could be somebody in New York. You know, it's just incredible how interconnected we are. And I think that really is transformative. But ultimately, I think, look, we need to be smart. We need to negotiate better. Our policymakers need to be better. That's the way I see it.
My name is Titus.
Yes.
Thanks again for this very enlightening presentation.
Thank you.
My question was around what has been happening at Mumias Kenya in the recent
Yes.
times. Of course, a lot has been happening, and top on the list is what appears to be an imminent collapse of the company. Now, what's your take on the happenings, and what does it mean for the future of the Kenya sugar industry?
Yeah.
Is there a chance that the industry will survive from the onslaught of the private producers, the likes of Kisco, the lifting of the COMESA bans?
Yeah.
Yesterday there was some news about the government pumping in some money there. I mean, is there a point of government really putting in more money there, wasting public resources of the industry? I mean, the company should just be left to die a natural death, and probably let the people in Western Kenya find another economic activity to do.
I think Mumia Sugar is the biggest strain on ambitions for our governor, really, because if you go back and you look at Mumia Sugar, and the time I looked at it, and I don't know, I can't remember which year it was must have been like, there was a year in the last 5 years when sugar prices went through the roof. I can't remember which year it was. It was, the price per pound went from, it trades around $15. I can't remember what the exact thing is. It went as high as 38. In that period, Mumia should have made a massive profit. And so I was sitting there writing, my God, this is going to be a huge profit, one-off profit, you're making like double. And when the profit came through, it wasn't there. And when I looked into it, the problem at Mumias is very simple. The problem at Mumias is selling sugar at 30% below its recommended retail price. That's been going on for 5, 6 years. To stop that, someone has got to stop that. That's how easy it is to fix Mumias, or not easy. Who are these people who are making these windfall profits? So really, from a business point of view, I know what the problem is. The problem is that the company is selling sugar, and the profits it should be making are being made by people who are sitting in the middle. And that's been happening every single year. And the 30% discount is the difference between Mumias being a profitable company and Mumias not being a profitable company. There are a lot of challenges around, no doubt, if you take something like COMESA, but I think there is a viable sugar industry to be had there if it was managed properly. I really do. Now, we've had this huge recovery in Mumias' share price this month. It's the best performing stock in Nairobi, up 47%. If you put $100, you'd have 147, and not bad. But the trigger for that rally was Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich. And one sentence he said, we're looking at ways to support Mumias. And there was another sentence. And that was what triggered the rally. Because everybody said to themselves, okay, the government's going to step in and underwrite this business. And I think, from a point of view of, if you're from Western, this is an economic pillar. You can't let it go. It's like Mombasa Port. I mean, these are things where there is a duty of care. So I think the government will step in, and I think that share price probably goes a lot higher. But in order to resolve Mumia Sugar, it's a very simple thing. Make sure they sell their sugar at the price they should be selling at. Yes, hi.
How are you?
Fine.
My name is Moses.
Karibu.
And I have one question. We know that food prices provide a very strong tailwind to our economic growth. Now, the government is doing a lot is promising to do a lot in Kelana Kulalu. My question is, do you believe in it? And the second question is, vis-a-vis that project, what do you think is the future of the smallholder farmer out there in the countryside?
The first question was about Tana River Delta.
Yes, the Kelana Kulalu project. I mean, it's going to be one of the biggest projects in the world. I mean, do you really believe it?
Yeah.
My name is Harry, here, standing.
Hi.
I've got probably a question and a comment. One is, how did the McKinsey come up with the igdp measurement? Is it Because I know, yes, we're good users of technology, but I don't think we're good producers of technology. Then the other one is, I see a very common pattern in all African countries in terms of response to different issues, be it education, energy, anything you think of. Whenever we have a crisis, it's almost the same pattern. First is shock, then denial, then try and sort of manage the situation, then look for a solution. So the solution is normally looked at probably 4 or 5 steps later. How do we get our policymakers to be able to react, not react, but respond effectively, as opposed to react to this kind of things? Thank you.
You're excited about growth in Kenya. You're pushing most of it over the past decade to igdp. And I'm thinking, if you're not Bob Collymore, you're not smiling at it, are you? Again, we've got car dealerships springing up on every other road, and we've cleared out couple bushes and put concrete in its place. What's to cushion the shilling?
What's that?
What's to cushion the shilling?
Yeah, those car dealerships are a mystery to me, actually. I've been wondering, with such valuable real estate, so I'm still working my head around what exactly is happening in there. But it's pretty extraordinary when you think of the value of the land that's being utilized for the car dealerships. There must be a lot of car traffic. But I think there are some other reasons there, which I won't go into right now. I think in part it's a very quick way to convert money into a car and then convert it back. Sorry? Yes, yes. I didn't say launder. No. You did. I know. I'm coming to you next, Andrew, to take your question. So let me go back. Tana River, obviously a very large-scale project. I think those sort of large-scale projects have a lot of challenges in Kenya because I think you've got to align so many different interest groups and achieve that alignment, and it's proving quite difficult, I think. So it makes sense. I'm just not sure that there's a political will to push it over the line right now, as far as I can see, but I stand to be corrected. McKinsey IGDP, you're talking about the manufacturer. I think McKinsey IGDP was looking at it more from the consumer side, right? Which is an interesting point you're making. And a lot of people sort of tell me, we are not seeing what we all expected. We expected a silicon savannah, we expected this, we expected that, it hasn't come yet. It takes a little bit of time, I think we have the ingredients for that. I had a guest here, Dennis, you remember. I mean, Dennis has built a massive business in the area I'm talking about, and there are many Dennises around. Sometimes they don't appear here, but they are. And they're going to catch everyone's attention the day someone like Dennis sells a stake in his companies for a large amount of money. That day is not far away. And the moment that happens, I think everyone will suddenly understand the opportunity that there is in that sector. The challenge I found in the IT sector is, for many years, people were very good at applying for grants from Bill and Melinda Gates, right? You write a good plan, you get $50,000. But that's not the game now. The game is build a business, get $50 million for it, right? Don't go scraping around for a grant. Get the grant to start your business off. So I think what we're watching is an evolution happening from a sort of more grant-based way of thinking into a full-on entrepreneurial way of thinking. And I think that this switchover is now happening, and we will see a lot of activity, value creation in that IGDP economy. Your point is right. We don't manufacture any of these things. Look at somewhere like South Korea or Apple. Everyone's attention was caught by Apple, how much money they're making. You look at, if you hit it right in this global economy and you create real value, you have more money than countries. I don't know what the cash balance at Samsung and at Apple is, but it's phenomenal. I mean, they could sort of underwrite our infrastructure plan for the whole of Africa if they felt like it. But maybe we should go and tell them that they'll get some good returns from it. Regarding our responses, I agree with you that, and that's my one concern. I would say, if I was sitting there and talking to the president, I would say, you know, we've got to be smarter, quicker, and we've got to react better than everyone else against our peers, because we're also competing amongst our peers, Tanzania, Uganda. We need to be better. But also because we're competing on a global stage now. So absolutely, understand it, tell us what you're going to do, but move at speed, because at times we're moving way too slowly. For example, let's go back to the stock market. Capital gains tax at 5%, I haven't got an issue with that. I don't think anybody really has, okay? The optics of it are good, no one's really got an issue. But how do you tell a stockbroker to collect the capital gains tax, right? That stockbroker does not know what my portfolio looks like, what my gain or loss might be. They don't have visibility on what I'm doing. Why should they? I don't want to be with just one person. It means I'm stuck. If I'm not happy, what do I do? What about my losses? How are they computing my losses? So in any place in the world, a capital gains tax regime is implemented in a way that at the end of the year, I do my tax returns. I bought this, I sold this, net, this is what I owe you, and here's your check. But some guy who's sitting at the stockbroker to collect the tax, it's not going to work, right? They don't have 360-degree visibility on what you're doing. And therefore, again, here, you know, go to court, I'm taking this person, that. The thing is designed to fail. We can see it as a practitioner. It cannot be enforced in its current format. There is nowhere that I know in the world where a stockbroker is taking my capital gains tax, right? Nowhere. Now, find me one and I'll change my mind, but nowhere. So therefore, again, this comes back to my point. Not working? Change it. No one's fighting you on the tax. They're fighting you on the implementation. Understand what you're being fought on and change direction. What worried me in January is if we have big loggerheads, we have arguments, it contaminates our market. People start thinking, they forget the 5%, they just, there's some capital gains tax argument going on here, I'll leave it to see when it all settles down, which is what happens. So, taking your point. So, first of all, the cushion has been, a lot of money came in from the Eurobonds, so quite a bit of that has been used to do some intervention in support of the shilling. I think, you know, I think the markets are going to find a fair value for the shilling. I don't think our central bank should be fighting it. It's just not worth it, because at the end of the day, the markets are bigger than we are. And if they want to fight us, they're going to fight us. So, but the central bank has been quite good at intervention. Whoever's running that program is quite smart, because they come in at the right time, they push the market when the market, and they stop the panic. You can see that happening. It's relative. I give full credit to this central bank's intervention group. They're very smart. I think, you know, the shilling is going to be cushioned by a sharply lower price of oil. You think about it, before we were paying $100 for the same amount of fuel, now we're paying less than 50. Every month we've got to find half the amount of money we were having to find last year, right? That money is going to move around our economy as opposed to going to Dubai or to Abu Dhabi or somewhere else. So that is also going to be supportive. And I think, you know, remittances are the biggest component of support. Whenever I go around the world, and I went a few years ago with KCB, and we met the diaspora, you know, our people in an intellectual or information century, these people who go abroad and create careers and send money back, they're a very valuable asset. And I think in this case, they're also supporting the economy. If you look at real estate, they're the guys buying houses. If you know, a lot of that money is coming in, not captured completely in the data. I reckon it's a much higher number, and that's what's going to support it. In fact, I actually think we'll have a rate cut later on this year, because the inflation rate is going to go right down. I think we could have a zero inflation rate at some point later on in the year, which I think will surprise absolutely everybody, I'm sure. I think that was it, and I've got people who are just... Peter?
Yeah, my name's Andrew Franklin, and I always find these sessions to be rather fascinating. I disagree with a lot of what Aly-Khan says. these comments are about the intellectual dishonesty and the lack of history, of our knowledge of history. When we talk about value addition, we don't ask why Mumia sugar doesn't produce rum. And yet Barbados, 1650, which became the most prosperous colony in the British Empire on sugar, 1650, and they still produce rum. But we don't. Governor Cadero doesn't answer that question. I know. The capital gains tax. One of the interesting things that came out, is because I do talk a lot about security and governance issues and terrorism or insurgency, is the brokers finally said, we don't have personal identification numbers. These are people who deal in money, and they don't have pins. Does the government still issue pins? Which leads to the igdp, mobile money, hot money coming in to finance poaching. From where? Thailand? China? Hong Kong? Do you know? I don't know. Do people have pins? You know, we talk about value addition. We used to grow a lot of coffee here. KQ wants to fly to Vietnam. 15, 20 years ago, the Vietnamese looked at a few coffee plantations. Now they're the world's #2, #3 producer. Our coffee producers will tell you that their coffee's not so great. Okay, but we're not up there any longer. KQ has literally a monopoly, a regional monopoly. You look at the world, the globalized world, we're all hooked in tweets. An airplane is shot down somewhere over eastern Ukraine. It's not even the fault of Malaysian Air. Then what happens? They've also lost another airplane. That airline may go broke. We have had 2 fatal air crash disasters with KQ since 2000. Off Abidjan, Douala. You'll never see that on National Geographic. You'll never see seconds from disaster. We've never heard about any of those accidents, the reports, what caused them, what happened. And we don't ask. We celebrate the former CEO as one of those corporate titans. I seriously think that there's a lack of, we talk about corporate governance. There is a serious problem with intellectual dishonesty in this country. And I've been here for 34 years. There's a serious problem with the way ethics in business. Not that we don't bribe, not that our procurement people don't add money when they're buying pencils for our companies. But we just don't ask. We do not ask. The one place where the government in this country could add value is in security. And we don't demand that they add value in security. And Aly-Khan Satchu is absolutely correct when he talks about where we spend money and don't demand that we spend it on a national police service in accordance with the law. We give $100 billion a year. We do not spend the money on our Kenya Defense Forces. We don't support our troops properly. We don't implement the law. And we allow our leaders to tell us stuff that's not true. And we say nothing. The KDF in Amisom are supporting the government in Mogadishu, not our national interest. We seem to have a national leadership with no national interest. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adadana. I wanted to know your opinion on Bitcoin and if it will play any role in Africa in 2015.
Hi everyone, my name is Peter. My question to you, Aly-Khan, is recently I saw in the newspaper, Mikhail Gorbachev said that there is a chance that this Cold War might turn hot, you know, with Barack Obama putting a lot of pressure on Russia. So I just wanted your take on that. In addition, you're pretty bullish on 2015. So what are the risks to your forecast? I mean, what could go wrong that, you know, make 2015 not so bullish? Thank you.
I think there's a lot of potential for Bitcoin, right? Because, you know, fiat currencies, people have got less and less faith in. That's created the opportunity for Bitcoin. What I wasn't clear, and maybe you can explain this to me. You know, Bitcoin fluctuates every day in value, and there are huge fluctuations. I think the fluctuation, it's been about 20% this week, right? I think it had a good week, went up. Now, who bears that fluctuation risk? I honestly don't know. Yeah. You see, I don't know, and I've been trying to work that out. And until I work that out, I don't know I don't know what's happening, because if Bitcoin is a currency and it's moving up and down, it's moving up and down more than any other currency I know, except maybe the Euro Swiss, the day that they lifted the cap and that kind of thing. So I'm just, that's my one area of concern. But I think clearly, if you look at the growth of it, I think there's plenty of growth, and I think here it's going to grow very, very fast. It's already growing. big time, and I think it's going to get plugged into, it seems to be plugged into our mobile money architecture already in some shape or form. So I think it's got a strong future. I think you're dealing with people who've adopted digital money before M-Pesa, so it's going to be a relatively easy sell. You're selling to the converted in a way. Peter asked me about what were the risks. First of all, Ukraine, Gorbachev. I agree with Gorbachev. I think anything can happen at any moment, and that's why I called it an arrhythmic world. I think there's so many risks out there. We don't know what we, I go back to Donald Rumsfeld, known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. And I think, we're in a world which has moved down to the right-hand side of his continuum. And I genuinely worry about Ukraine. And, call me strange, but I think, if Vladimir was parked up somewhere in Mexico and sitting on the US border there, the US would have issues with him. And I think, therefore, I don't see Putin as the devil that he is sometimes portrayed as in the Western press. And I think that's also an interesting point that's happening here, is the press was very Western-facing before, and now it's changing. And particularly you see that from Africa, where people have, don't see it necessarily the same way the Wall Street Journal or Fox News are seeing it, thank God. But I do see it as extremely risky. I think, it has been, President Bush liked to drop bombs. These have been 50 times more effective bombs. This is shock and awe on a new level, right? You have crushed an economy. You've taken the currency down. Your people have been borrowing money abroad to finance projects. Suddenly they've got to pay back double. It's horrendous. And it was designed to do this. The test case was actually Iran, in many respects, where the Iranian rial came under real pressure as a first test of currency warfare, being a coercive diplomatic tool to put pressure on somebody. But I don't think Putin is Iran. I think Putin and the Russian psyche are very, and actually the Iranian psyche is similar to the Russian psyche, very strong, nationalistic. You put them under pressure, they're going to back their president. They're not going to go and say, they're not going to go the other way, which is what seems to be the thinking. The risks to my bullish scenario are several. Political. I think, we've got this devolution process happening, which is a great political thing, but it's like having one CEO and then setting up 47 CEOs, right? Everyone's now a CEO. Everyone wants the infrastructure of a CEO. Fine, but also let's be commercial about it, right? Show us who can deliver. So there's a little bit of messiness, I think, around. That concerns me. A little bit of uncertainty on the politics side. The insurgency that seems to have calmed down a little bit, thank God. But still, imagine if the scenario, tourism scenario plays out, people continue to lose jobs on the coast. These are going to be easy pickings for anybody who's going to come and tell them a story and pay them a check. That kind of thing worries me. And a lack of policy response to the new reality. I'm not being bearish on oil. Just let's forget about oil. Let's go to geothermal. We've got fantastic resources. Brilliant. We're lucky. We're top 10 in geothermal. Fine. Let's just refocus a little bit. It's no good borrowing $4 billion and spending it on oil when if it's at $50, you're not going to be pumping anything, right? So let's try and adjust. I think that's the key message. Let me leave you with the last comment because I'm going to invite you to come and speak next time round, Peter. Peter's at UAP, he runs the investment book there. What is your scenario? Are you bullish?
Yes, we are, because of a few factors that you mentioned. For example, falling inflation.
Yeah.
With inflation falling, interest rates are going to come down as well, so that just means companies and individuals can borrow more cheaply.
Yeah.
We have all these big infrastructure projects as well coming online, the standard gauge railway, LAPSET and everything. So those will definitely pump money into the economy. So we're bullish as well on the economy as well.
Great. I think, we're going to see a big, the big story intra-Africa is what they're calling a west-east switch. A lot of people are expecting a big switch out of capital, which was going west. Look, Nigeria's story is a great story. It's going to come, it's going to be big, it's 170 million people. But right now, trying to get into Nigeria, it's catching a falling knife. Not many people I know like doing that.
Yes, my name is Dominic. I want to, first of all, appreciate the way you've put it across to us.
Thank you.
And my concern is on the Eurobond.
Yes.
You've mentioned a very interesting issue concerning Ghana, that after they raised all the money they raised, they pumped it back to the salaries. Don't you think it's just replicating itself right here? Let me put it across this way. What is your take concerning the devolution part of it, looking at the constitutional offices that we've created by that, looking at how the CEOs, quote unquote, are behaving, and also the MCs, let me call them that way, holding the same CEOs, you know, at lump sum. Case in scenario, we have McQueen, for example, where nothing is going on, no project is taking off. The last couple of years, I mean, for like a whole year, nothing has been going on, and yet we are still incurring interest. What's your take on that?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Carol.
Hi, Carol.
Just to add to what he's saying and what the other gentleman here said, I think this kind of fora bring out these critical issues. But what can we do, or what can you do, or what can, like, this critical mass do to begin to drive change in the leadership? Because development in Africa is directly related to politics.
Yes.
You know, there's the correlation you cannot
100%,
deny.
yes, yes.
So what we need to do is develop systems or put in place mechanisms to ensure that the leadership is able to either be inducted once they assume leadership, so that they understand the economic factors or the implications of their actions to the economic development of countries or the country that they're running, because then the resources that we have will be better utilized, or more, better utilized for the people. Because what is happening is, it's actually political, the political impact, the political actions impacting on the development, either because of lack of knowledge or the big man attitude that we really have. So can a critical mass begin to be developed?
My name is Atitaita Zayusa. My question was going on, basing on all this, there's the aspect of Japan. As Japan, maybe we've lost it out of the picture. And there's another question on private equity. Currently in Africa, I think East Africa is doing well, the private equity. And then the private equity in terms of the pension funds. How easy is it? Are they embracing the idea of private equity in terms of unlocking the money that they have? And also on the central bank, the deposits that they are maybe having in that space. Can it maybe be pulled on the private equity, the circles, the chamas? There's a lot of money that is lying idle. Because casing in point that we are seeing in the current bonds that are being raised, they are basically all of them are being oversubscribed. Yeah, that's my take on that.
The question about the Eurobond, about Ghana. Ghana is the warning bell for Africa. Right? What is the warning bell? The warning bell is our governments are too expensive. Right? We're living in the 21st century. I hate to say it, and I think it's a political issue, because, you know, I think our government should be getting someone like McKinsey and basically saying to our people, we want to reduce by half. We're going to give you a 3-month, 6-month program to send you into the private sector, and this is the way we've got to do it. And I think that's the only way we're going to be able to do it. Otherwise, we're going to continue bloating up, bloating up, bloating up, bloating up. Because that is the political imperative. You come into power, you want your people there, you're going to put people in, and it just continues compounding on itself. Ghana is the lesson that is not possible. And if you've got a Eurobond out there, you're in deep trouble. Because what happens is the Eurobond falls through the floor. Ghana, Eurobond went from 8%, we are at about 6.25%, went from 8 to over 11. right? Now that means people think that Ghana cannot pay them back. That's why they're demanding such a high rate of interest. And that's what I was saying about the pricing, bringing more policy stabilization, because people are going to go, oh, I don't want that to happen to me. Right? I mean, you can imagine if it happens to us, what are our policymakers going to be dealing with? A nightmare, right? So I think it's good, but also Ghana is a lesson to us. Now, we're in this messy period where because of politics, a sense of people not feeling that, you know, government, Serikali was a helicopter up there, nothing to do with us. We wanted to bring it down. We wanted people to feel and touch that this is my guy. And also, it's going to cause an effect, because if your guy doesn't perform and someone else is performing, people over time are going to say, well, what's happening? Why aren't you? So I think actually it's going to be positive in the medium term, because you'll have comparison points and people will have expectations, right? If you don't deliver now, you know, I think the politics of Africa is changing in the sense that before you had to consolidate your bloc, right? You had to make sure you delivered as many as your bloc as possible. If you had the numbers, you'd make it. I think today it's going to change. You're going to have to deliver. You can't sit as an MP for somewhere for 30 years and nothing has happened. You can't sit as a governor and you haven't created anything. So the test is going to come. I think initially it was a big ego thing, and I got pushed off the car by a governor's car in Nairobi, and I realized it was the governor Migori. And I was thinking to myself, wow. But sorry, that's just an aside. But I do think, look, you know, very messy, a challenge, but ultimately headed in the right direction, because people are going to see the cause and effect. Ah, I'm from Mombasa. What have you done? Have you changed anything? Did you do, you know, and that is going to make the difference. And I think we're seeing that cause and effect change from Kinshasa to Ouagadougou to events in that near Wilson Airport, right? Where you had society bringing pressure. Maybe someone does a funny trick and gets away with it this time, but over time it's going to be more and more difficult to get away with, you know, and I think that's going to be a very, very dynamic change. With you, which is more about creating a sort of a way of pressing, of putting pressure. Well, let's do it. Why not? There are lots of things I want to do, which I'll finish off in a minute. I do a lot of work through the Kenya National Chamber, Kiprono. He's very, very proactive, and I like his style, and you know, so there are different pressure points. But I agree. I think, you know, if the more people, the more you consolidate with one voice, the more people that you're working together with, the more powerful you become in such an environment. And just remind me. Yes. Japan. Yes. Japan. Shinzo Abe came to Africa. You might have forgotten. He came last year. He went mostly to gas destinations, because Japan's big challenge, of course, is power, particularly after Fukushima. And they might be turning some of those things back on again. I worked for the Japanese at Sumitomo Bank. I'll tell you a funny story. I'd just been hired. I was 28 years old. I had a lot of people had come in with me. We were about 15 people. When you're a banker, it's all about the bottom line, so you need to be working. We had to put a computer system in. We were working late at night. And I look up at about 11 p.m. because, you know, for us it was just, let's get started until. And no one had left the office. And I looked around and I thought, what's happened? And our boss was a man called Konishi-san. So I went to some other san. I said, "San, what's happened?" He said, "Konishi-san's sleeping at his desk." I looked in the desk. Konishi-san was asleep. In Japan, you can't leave till your boss has left. So this had left 100 people in the office at 11 p.m. because Konishi-san was so exhausted. I said, "I'll call Konishi-san." "Ali-san, no call Konishi-san. Terrible, terrible, terrible." They left at 2 in the morning. But, but you know, the Japanese have a lot to offer. You can see that in the quality of the road in Kileleshwa. Right? It's a good road. I might disagree with a few things, but it's the best drainage that I've seen compared to some other stuff. And I, for one, think that the Japanese, when they get into something, they have a very, very strong commitment. And again, going back to my multilateral, multipolar thinking, we got to deal with everybody. Japanese, Chinese, US, Europe, And by creating that competition, we'll get a better deal for ourselves. It's when we think, when we give things to other people, or special favor, we're going to do this with you. If it makes sense, do it. I don't mind, but at least have competition. The more competition you have in something, the better end result you're going to have. I would like to thank all of you for coming today. I really appreciate it, and seeing old faces, new faces, and friends. It really has been a pleasure. I hope it was interesting. I would like to just finish off by thanking a number of people. I'd like to thank the Intercontinental, who've been very, very strong supporters of ours throughout, from the time when President Museveni came, and we had to find a location very quickly. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you, because I was thinking about it this morning, and I was thinking to myself, this is my tribe, my 21st century tribe. It's my people in this place, and I really appreciate it. It gives me energy during my week. It gives me energy of all this conversation, and I'm very grateful to all of you. And I hope it was interesting today. Thank you.